The, yeah, I was just gonna do that before it started dinging me here. The amount that we have gone back and forth about with the state and SEMCAC, and they've whittled her down, is about, we're thinking it would be an amount not to exceed $25,875, unless the only way that amount would change would be if we found a lot more people we could help, and the state is able to find us more dollars to help.
That amount comes out of what we get from the deed then?
Yes.
I'd second that.
Motion by Mr. Dahl, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. 7D is consideration of approving the Rushford Council's findings from the public hearing on the Rushford Municipal Liquor Store and directing staff to carry out its wishes. And you're familiar with the options that you have in front of you. Any other questions for Mr. Block?
What would be the options for, if the liquor store was closed, what would be the option for the building?
The building has to, unless you want to pay 900 or 800 and some thousand back, which I don't think you want to do, it has to remain a public use. Couldn't, it can't transfer to the private sector. So we'd have to find another use or do something to keep it a public building, so that when FEMA came to audit, they would find a public use that benefited all of the citizens, or as they perceive all of the citizens of Rushford.
I move to approve keeping the liquor store open and running. And one of the reasons is the hiring, the staff that we have there. We have 9 people employed that help continue to keep our city going. We have a booster club that puts dollars back into our community. And I hope that our community supports this business as we try to support other local business.
Motion by Ms. Benson, is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Walter. Any further discussion?
If it hasn't made money the first solid year, I question, is it gonna make money next year? We're gonna continue.
The projected losses, which is what? It's not, according to the graph, it doesn't have a dollar amount, but it's not that great.
No, it's a small amount, but it's a good point. We don't know until, that's why I almost hesitate to put 2009, because that's not supposed to be part of your consideration, other than, looking at the long term.
But it is, if it
Right.
hasn't made money in a full year in this brand new facility, I can't see where it's gonna pick up or what.
Well, we don't know that for a fact. We do need to audit those numbers and see. So that's one thing, that we're only taking cash positions that we see, and we don't have the inventory. We haven't finalized the inventory for the year. So there's a lot of variables that could change things in the December month. And that's why I think if you were going to make that decision, you'd make it based on a history of some type of, a trend, if it continues to be in the negative. And in checking with the state liquor people, this is not uncommon for communities to go through this. We've been lucky not to have. We're one of the few that has never had a hearing. And, there's no guarantees, but certainly you have a venue that has the possibility, and the market, based on the market study, which, you've all had access to understand that this store can make that kind of money, and it should be providing between $25,000 and $40,000 a year for you to supplement the budget.
Was that market study done after the smoking ban? Or before?
It was done right at the same time, I believe. But I don't know if it didn't capture the impact of what's happened to liquor sales. I believe that ban went into effect after that point. But I remember we discussed that, and you raised that as an issue that would devastate the sale of liquor anywhere, whether it's municipal or private. And, but I believe that study was done just prior to that law becoming passed.
Does it have to go through till the next December for consideration?
Every year, the council will look at a 3-year period, and they need to look at the last 3 years that during, for example, during 2009, you look at 2006, 7, and 8, and then in the last 45 days of the year, you hold a hearing if you need to, based on what happened in those 3. So in 2010, the council will look at 2007, 8, and 9. So already we know we got 2 years of loss, right? So there will be another hearing, whether, even if 2009 turned out to be a positive year, there has to be another hearing at the end of 2010, just as you're doing tonight.
My question would be, though, if after 2009 is fully audited or accounted for, would there then be possibility of bringing this matter up in, say, middle of the year of 2010? No. It has to be 2000 December.
Well, they're very precise. That doesn't mean the council can't bring it up and say, we'd like to change something we're doing there. I mean, you can make changes, but you cannot take and put it to the voters for a vote to close the municipal. That's the part they control by that 45-day period.
Any other questions?
But it doesn't go to a vote this year then, by the public.
No, the process, as I understand it, is the council would need to set a date and authorize a vote. That would be at the next general election. You're not supposed to, I think the law precludes spending taxpayer money to do something extra above and beyond. So it waits until the next general election. And so if you voted now to close it, to put it to a vote, you could put it to a vote subject to that vote occurring next fall. And then at the same time determine, the motion would have to determine when was it going to close, so that the voter would be saying, oh, it's going to close in 2014. So that you could, in theory, I think, is to try to, you've got 9 or so employees, not all full-time obviously, but you do have some, and you have assets that you want to spend down, and, you know, so it tries to give you time to get out without crashing yourself and causing yourself loss by just shutting down inappropriately. So the council at the end of 2010 would be voting to set it at that next election, which would then be in 2011, and at that time I believe there's a 36-month window that they can mandate that the closure would occur. They need to spell that out when that closure is going to happen.
The reason I ask is because it can only be used because FEMA has a city facility. If it, say, the council decides to close it a year from now, if there isn't a need for city building at that time, what would we come up with?
Well, the council could look to, if they could find a buyer that would pay them enough money to pay FEMA back, that would be a possibility.
That would never happen, you know that.
Well, I don't know, I don't know if that's true, but I'm just saying, that's the kind of planning that you'd want to do as a council person, saying that if we're going to close it, we want to make sure we have an exit strategy so that we don't get burnt by the FEMA audit.